Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Miss Marvel. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately picking up after last episode, being rescued by Cameron and his mom, Najima, Kamala learns the truth about her heritage, that she's... well, technically, her great-grandmother, Aisha, isn't from this world. She's actually from a different dimension. You're like, okay, wasn't expecting that. Which I'm curious with the whole Nora situation. Are they going to make that something like, is that going to be like the subtle equivalency to the Inhumans? Right, rather than like, is that their roundabout way of kind of, once again, the question was like, are they going to like bring, like without going, they've already kind of introduced Inhumans by having Black Bolt, but once again, that's on Earth 838. So what if are they going to make it so that Inhumans are, it could still be the moon thing, that they're actually like been on the moon the entire time and stuff like that, Black Bolt and everything, but maybe they can make it from a different dimension. Because they were, it could just be that they were, because I'm curious, are they going to use it to say, like, the Nora is kind of like the name they gave themselves, but maybe if you translate it... well, no, because the translated name here is Jinn. So that's the closest thing to who or what, like, the other aliases they've gotten is called the Jinn. So I was about to say, could it be like a translated name for Inhumans, but it's like, no, it's definitely Jinn. So they're probably not going down that route. If they wanted to, they could, but I don't know if they necessarily would. To be fair, that's just another name given to them. It's the closest thing is Jim. So I think they could work it in. I don't know how people would feel about it, but there is room to kind of push the Inhuman route here. Just make it from a different dimension rather than just being like from the whole moon thing. Which also would be interesting because like Hydra, who is like the first Inhuman, was actually sealed away in another dimension in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like he was sealed away in a different dimension a long time ago, but he's what Hydra pulls from. Like that's what their symbol represents. It's him. So that's just something. I don't know if they'd go that far connecting those threads, but like that, I just thought that was interesting thinking about him being an Inhuman and he's from a different dimension. Well, he was sealed from a different dimension. I don't know if he was necessarily from one. I mean, that was like a season 3 storyline, so that was a couple years ago, so I don't remember all the details about his circumstances. But I figured something immediately was up the moment we went back in time. It was like 1942 during Patrician, and it was Najima and Aisha, but Najima looked the same. I'm like, wait, do you not age? What's going on here? And then we met the others who haven't aged either. I was like, do you age slowly? Turns out that's the case. They're not like full-blown Eternals where they don't age at all. It's like, no, they age. It's just really slowly because the Nora energy inside of them, that's all they can access. Which is, just because obviously it's in my mind is like, well, I don't know how many things really cover this. Well, if we want to keep on the Marvel route, doesn't Logan, Wolverine, doesn't he age slowly? I think so. I think that's kind of the whole point. Like, he ages extremely slowly. Maybe Bruce Banner does too. At least the Hulk does. I don't know if that necessarily translates to Bruce. You would assume it does. But what I was going down the route was like Superman, because I know the Kryptonians age slower than a normal human. But I don't know if that's just a TV thing. I don't know if that's something out of the comics or not. But regardless, I think Wolverine would be the more like Marvel equivalent. Age extremely slowly. Because at least with the Eternals case, it's like, well, they're not just immortal. They're not even human. They're like synthetically created. So, regardless. But I thought that was interesting. And we find out that, yes, there is another bangle. Just no one knows where it is. Aisha ended up finding it. And the whole plan is to get back home. And that's the last time it seems like anyone might have seen Aisha. But later on, context makes it seem like Najima and the others came after her. Because she probably didn't want to do what they wanted. She wanted to kind of take time and it would have been dangerous. Plus, it would also mean leaving behind her family and she wasn't willing to do that. I don't know. I get the feeling like they ended up attacking her and because we still have no idea where, not less they, because I wonder, can no one else use the bangle? Because Aisha put it on, maybe it's allocated to their DNA now. So only her descendants can use it. So like her daughter Sana, Kamala's mom, and herself. Like maybe they're the only ones. And it might be specifically genetically designed so only the females in the family can use it too. It could be like specifically tied to their It might not be, it might be genetically connected to their genetic makeup specifically, so I don't know. Well, I don't know, because like the only ones who actually used it have been Aisha and Kamala that we're aware of. I don't think Kamala's mom's ever used it. We don't know about Sana, her grandmother. We don't know about Kamala's grandmother, whether or not she's used it or not. But for Kamala, this does fill in a lot of gaps. It's like, right, I'm not Asgardian, I'm not alien, but I'm something else. I'm from a different dimension, but she's still part human. Once again, starts getting to that territory of, is it kind of very much like spoiler Viltrumite, where it's like, is she like Saiyans, where it's like, okay, Gohan's half human, half Saiyan, whereas like, because even though he's part human, Mark is still more Viltrumite than human because that's how pure the Viltrumite blood is. So I'm curious I think Invincible's probably on its own with how it handles the whole half and half thing, which it's like, yeah, you're more Viltrumite than human just because that's how powerful the blood. I don't know if that necessarily translates to other things. It's usually like half and half. So I wonder, what does that mean for the human side of her? Because you assume it has to be like a human thing. Because I was like, because you would it probably exists in her grandmother and her mom. Once again, they probably just never used the bangle to unlock it. It's there because Cameron's mom says that basically they all have that potential. It's just they can't draw upon that power because they're not in their dimension anymore. But Kamala can. Her theory is because Kamala's born in this world, it allows her to draw on energy from that other world, which I guess that's almost what that was when she like first put the bangle on and flipped into that other world. I guess it was like almost like, I took it as like maybe she almost entered like this energy frequency, but maybe that's kind of like her slipping momentarily into that other dimension for a little bit, or maybe that's just kind of representing like the Nora energy that's around that she's able to draw upon, that maybe it's all around that she can use, but no one else can really fully tap into it, except for what's just kind of naturally in their bodies, lowering their aging rate. I don't know. I just thought that was like fascinating, really getting into it, because I Googled it really quickly. I meant to bring this up earlier. The Nora, I don't think that's anything for the comics. I just quickly Googled it. There's a character named Ahmed Noor, but that's about it. And then there's like Apocalypse, but his name Nur is spelled just N-U-R and not N-O-O-R. So there's a difference. But because at first I was like, wait, is this connected to Apocalypse? But it's like, no, it's a different spelling of the name. So, but I thought was really interesting that Kamala's like finding out like, oh my God, here's some amazing stuff I'm finding out about myself. She's still feeling a little beat up about like, yeah, I tried the superhero thing and that kind of failed. I didn't really succeed last time. But then problems started arising because damage control showed up. I wouldn't have maybe they showed their badges or something. I think this is the first time they're mentioning that those agents are for damage control. I'm like, that's fascinating. I don't think they've popped up since the beginning of Homecoming, like, which, canonically that's like right after the events of Avengers. Which, even then, they were kind of dicks, and they're kind of showing themselves off to be dicks now, too. Kind of a little... It might be the thing of, yeah, you have, like, altruistic reasons why you're doing what you're doing, but you're still kind of dicks. Because I guess it just comes down to management. I mean, this is also, like, for one, that was 2012. It's 2023, 2024, 2025. Like, we're post-Endgame, too, so there's even a 5-year time skip. So who knows what damage control went through in that time frame, so... I just thought that was interesting when they rolled up into mosque like that. And, because I'm not well versed in the culture, but I think that is super disrespectful. It's like, yeah, that kind of shows like their discontent of like, right, they just showed up with their shoes on. It's like, but I should have realized at the time. It's like, right, that is, I mean, it's obvious that you don't wear your shoes there. It's one of those things where it's like, it, but you just kind of don't think about it at the time. But I love that Nakia is the one that kind of put her in her place. They're like, oh, we're going to search for that hero, nightly. But it's like, no, you're not going to. It's like, oh, you have time to study Law and Homeroom? She's like, Law and Order reruns, but still, the law is the law. And I love Nakia brought up a very important question. It's like, oh, are you here? Is she the real danger? You're here because it's important because she's an enhanced person, or because she could belong to this mosque? I was like, that's a very important distinction, and I love that they don't shy away from that conversation in this either. Of like, oh, like, are you coming after her because she's enhanced, or is this a conversation about coming after her because she's Muslim? I'm like, ooh, and then like that agent, she's super smart. I think that's also what rubs us the wrong way, because like douchebag agents, you're like, come on, we've met some good agents, like the charming Jimmy Woo, but we've also met other douchebag agents like Home Dude. God, I'm blanking on his name from WandaVision. He was kind of a dick. Who was kind of the head of SWORD at the time. Him, who just recently popped up in, most recently in The Time Traveler's Wife on HBO. But regardless. But I love that Kamala has entered this complicated area of like, right, she tried to be a hero, but she's actually caused more trouble for her people. Like, they're, you know, because even Nakia says, like, right, she's actually drawing more attention to us. Like, we already have so much we already got to deal with. Now she's making even more bad publicity, because now it's turning into that whole, oh, good Muslim versus bad Muslim type of situation. Like, we are going to be, they're trying to set us up. She was saying they're basically trying to set us up to monitor our own people. And that's a conversation most recently, like the character Sheriff Hassan in Midnight Mass, like his monologue touched on that very same conversation. And I'm like, that's a very powerful and real conversation to have in this show. And that's what makes Kamala feel so conflicted on wanting to tell her best friend the truth. Because it's like, right, I wanted to do good, but what if I'm causing more harm than good, you know? And so, especially because she found out, like, wait, we're jinns, the thing that I grew up fearing, kind of ghost stories. I even love Bruno being like, oh yeah, like helping out ghosts and a guy that's obviously average looking at best, and even almost Kamala's like, what, are we looking at the same dude? But there's that element of she doesn't know if she's doing the right thing. And for Kamala, it's like, this is all she's ever wanted. She wanted to be a hero, but now it's like, right, they don't always tell you the downside of it. And it's because for her, it's like, not only could people get hurt because I'm not a professional at this, also my community is getting mixed up in this. And it's just, I'm causing more harm for my people than anything, you know? And I think that's a very... Because, yeah, Spidey's kind of stumbled before, but this adds an extra layer of like, yeah, but my stumbles... like can heavily impact my community, which is already in a very complicated space in the view of America. Like, there's already kind of this negative connotation against my people, and now like I'm adding more to that stigma by drawing unnecessary attention to them, like by getting like the police and like damage control involved. So I just thought that added this powerful layer to that whole situation. And I love that conversation of, what was it? How do you know when you want to do good? And I love, Kamala, you aren't good. Good is what you do. I was like, oh, I love that. You know, because it's more so about your action and your choices that matter the most. You know, there is no just like, you know, good is in what you do. Your choices that you make, the actions that you take are what decide. Those are what can be determined as good or bad, not just you innately. Because to me, it almost makes it seem like there's like almost no good and bad. I like to believe like people are just a natural neutral, like you're neither good nor bad. You're just neutral, and your choices are what influence and decide, you know, that. You know, I thought that was interesting. But that conversation she had with her mom too of, yeah, when you had everything you wanted, but it just seemed like it's not as easy and not as good as you thought. And her mom was like, yeah, coming to America, me and your dad, it was a struggle. Your brother was like still in diapers at the time. Like, coming to America was the mountain we had to overcome. I couldn't speak. She's like, I didn't speak English very well. And it's like, but how did you overcome it? She's like, she found her community. She's like, I found my family, people who would love me back. And I was like, that's, once again, it's like that community angle, that family angle to it. I think that's such a beautiful theme and element to lean on. And it's like, oh, you know, now your brother's getting married. And Kamala's like, yeah, who would have thought? And even her mom being like, yeah, who would have thought he'd ever get married? I thought that's kind of cute. I also appreciate, Kamala's dad helping Bruno out, translating and finding out more about jinns. So the legends about them does kind of fill into the whole, like, right, they're from a different world, but they've been given names across different, you know, because I was always unsure about the jinn and genie thing, because I always equated them as being the same thing, but then I always thought like, oh, maybe jinns and genies are a little different. But in fact, they are. It's just a different cultures, like it's just a different name given to them, but they've also been referred to as demons as well. So it's like, and once again, it just comes down to what choices you make. You know, the things you do is the good and bad of it all, you know? I also thought it was interesting too that Bruno kind of ended up having to tell Kamala that he's going to Caltech and he wants to help her. He'll do anything he can to help her, but the thing is, it has to be today because, well, if it has to be today, because helping, like, the amount of energy she would need to basically rip open an interdimensional portal could be dangerous because you would need the energy amount of the sun, if not more, and that leaves like a large room for error and things could go boom, you know? And I love her saying, like, could you break that down as if you had a social life and go? So she wants to help out, but not if it means endangering more people, especially causing more harm, especially where things currently are. It's like, right, she's trying her best and she's already stumbling, so I don't want to make things worse, even though I'm helping out people who are my people, and I'm trying to help them get back home, fulfill my grandmother's wish to get our people home. So, but she needs time to find a different way. And even finding out, like, why didn't you tell me immediately? He's like, well, you were busy. And I think for her, it's like, right, she was so wrapped up in the superhero thing. She was so wrapped up in Cameron. She never really checked in with Bruno and the others. So I even love the conversation with Tasha, Amir's fiance, now wife, by the end of the episode. Was like, wow, Kamala, are all these people your family? She's like, yeah, we're Pakistani. We roll deep. I was like, I like that. Because you always hear that about Mexican and Irish families, that they roll pretty deep too. I mean, I guess it also depends on what generation you're from, because some families roll pretty deep, having a whole bunch of kids too. But I definitely have heard that about Mexican families and Irish families, because I know Irish families all about like, I've always heard like a joke of like, oh, you don't have 4 or 5 kids? What's wrong with you? Like, I heard someone make a joke about that one time, and I thought that was such an interesting thing, but I didn't know that that rolling deep thing also applies to Pakistani people too, so I thought that was kind of pretty dope. And her overhearing that conversation between her dad and her brother, because for him it's like, right, I have 700 and some bucks in the account, because it's like, for him it's like, who am I getting? I'm getting married to someone, but how can I help support my family when I don't have it? But his dad's like, don't worry about it. After grad school, you'll figure it out. And I love that it's like, it's about choosing love and passion and family. The man who chooses that, like, you know, you have your faith and your courage to choose family, that person will never be alone. Because that's what Kamala was feeling. She was feeling alone, and her mother felt alone, but she found family, she found her community, and that made her not feel as alone. And I think Kamala in that moment choosing family, and the celebration I thought was so beautiful. The ceremony, the dancing, and all of it. I just thought that was amazing. It was a beautiful situation. However, Najma and the other Noor aren't waiting. As understandable, they've been here for like 100 years and like, no, we need to get home. Who cares about what the cost? We're not going to wait another day longer. So they're going to force Kamala. Cameron shows up to warn her, but by the time they do, things escalate and turns into a full. And I think it's a very important thing to notice too. The entirety, Kamala's on defense, because she doesn't go on the offensive until Bruno got hurt. That's when she went on the offensive, because she didn't want to hurt them. It's like, right, can't we just talk this out? But you know, Najma calling her selfish. I'm like, what are you doing? You're being selfish. Like, she's just saying, give her time, she'll help out. But it's like, for her, it's like, oh, you found out the truth about us and you're turning on your people. It's like, no. She's like, we will deal with anyone who betrays us. And the whole train situation division makes me go like, right, that's probably why her great-grandmother never got on the train, because they had talked about it a little bit earlier, her mother, about, I love the conversation, because it's always like, right, mothers and their daughters, there's always kind of a complicated thing, I think, especially amongst the Khan family, but it's like, oh, Kamala's grandmother couldn't make it, but her mom was like, well, she couldn't make it to my wedding, like, what could I expect her to show up at her own grandson's wedding either? And so there's definitely some issues there. Like, obviously she also has issues with her great-grandmother, with her grandmother, sorry, and Kamala's great-grandmother, Aisha. But I think we now find out there's extenuating circumstances. I think Najma and the others stopped her. Once again, the question is, though, where is the other bangle then? If they found the one on somebody's, like, severed hand, where's the other? Like, they were saying, like, right, the British had already, like, probably scoured that entire place and scavenged whatever they could. So they might be the ones who already have it. It could be that could be the case, or someone else already grabbed it. So I wonder, is it one of those things that has to be given willingly? Could they ever just take it off Kamala? They probably can't. She probably has to give it up willingly. And once again, who's to say it isn't? I've thrown it out there, but maybe it's tied to her DNA, maybe it's not. Kamala's fighting against them. The only person we never got to fully see what her deal is, Najima, because the others, like, one had a spear. I think it was Adam. He kind of had like a mace, and the other dude had like his belt is almost like a whip. So we see their weaponized situations, but like Cameron's mom, well, we saw him use a weapon, but we don't know because I don't know if that seems like that, because I think that's technologically based. I don't think none of that's necessarily power based, because they can't really use their powers. So it has to be like technology from their universe that they brought over. Which also shows that Cameron is a very adept fighter as well. Which, because they set that the whole thing about like, oh, well, because Cameron's from this world too, maybe he could also use a bangle too. So if they ever get a second bangle, they're just going to have Cameron be the one to pop over the portal. It's all on Kamala now, because she's the only one that has a bangle, at least the only one that they're aware of. So, but like I said, she didn't really go in offensive mode until they were all, until Bruno got hurt in the process and she fought back. And then Nakia finding out at the end, it's like, wait, you're Nightlight, why didn't you tell me? It's like, well, to be fair, you weren't the biggest fan of Nightlight, and she was kind of worried and scared about telling you the truth, but now she doesn't have much choice, so Bruno's going to fill her in on it. That's probably going to complicate their friendship a bit, but maybe, hopefully, it's just going to be okay. It's like, right, you should have told me, like, I'm here to help you and support you through all this. Like, holy crap, like, Bruno told me everything. I even love, right, it's like, Kamala, get Brian out of here. It's like, I can't swear he's doing it. He's literally getting my name wrong on purpose. But Damage Control luckily showed up, and Cameron, sadly, and his mom and the others got arrested. So we'll see how that plays out. But when the time comes, Kamala can't tell her family, because it's like, right, so much has already happened because of this. She even thought maybe the Bengals bring more bad than good. I also didn't talk about it, but I do like that Bruno already made her mask. So I wonder if she's going to, make her own suit as well or not. I don't know, just kind of, on the other end of things, it kind of reminds me of Arrow, because Barry's the one that made Oliver's mask in that, because he made it in season 2. It was a gift, so it just kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But she can't tell her family the truth about what's going on, because she wants to, but she kind of, and that's the sad thing of like, right, the messaging of this episode is like, right, when you have family by your side, when you choose family, you never have to walk alone. But she's choosing to walk alone because she's scared that her family will get dragged in all of this, and it'll be on her. She's already dragged so many people into it, her friends, her community. It's like, it's a lot. But then she talks to her grandmother, who somehow also had the vision as well with the train. So it's like, right, you have to, you have to come to Koreshi and bring your mom too. What that's all about, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm assuming it's going to dive into the past, because maybe Sana knows a lot more about what happened to Aisha than, Kamala's mom does. Because she seems kind of oblivious to some of this. Once again, she immediately recognized the bangle, so that makes me wonder, how much does she actually know? She probably knows some of the story, but probably ignored other bits. Because my thought was from the beginning, is like, oh, maybe she has issues, because I didn't know it was like her mother's, it was Kamala's great-grandmother. I thought it was her grandmother that had the bangle and was doing her thing, but obviously she was a kid at the time. But once again, maybe she eventually did pick up that bangle, and that led to complicated things. Because once again, like, Sana's seen as kind of, well, Aisha is one thing, and Sana seems to be another issue entirely when it comes to Kamala's mom. So what that all entails, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where the next episode takes us going forward with this. But I'm very, very curious to see. Really quickly, I should have brought this up first. Is Damage Control is its own thing really quickly, right? I think it is, because part of me was almost like equating it to, is it like under the Shield umbrella? But I'm like, once again, what the state of Shield is, especially now with Sword's existence. Plus, there's the Sword on Earth. There's the one that Fury's a part of, or at least whatever he's doing in space. You know, at the end of Far From Home. But I think Damage Control is its own entity. I think it might have ties to Shield, but I don't know if it's under the Shield umbrella. And just thinking about that. I'm curious to see will they end up being more allies or enemies going forward. You'd assume Kamala would get mixed up with Sword, because I'm curious, will Nick Fury come down to... I wonder, will this kind of like tie into Secret Invasion in any shape or form, because of the Skrulls and everything, and their ties to Carol. Just stuff kind of floating through my head. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.